everyone says this is a productivity improvement here. The reality is that 99% of companies can't afford it because no one owns a training budget to upskill all their employees. We're in dozens of companies that have 4,000, 6,000, 30,000, and they want to upsell, but no one owns that budget here. We also get the questions, oh, if I have $1 million, should I invest that employee training for my 5,000 employees, or should I do a customer service application and get much more focus here? So we're seeing a lot on that. We're seeing a lot of companies that want the productivity gain and feel like we can just send our URL to YouTube to our employees. Our employees are really smart. They can just self-learn. And we have not seen that to be the case at all. But I'm curious if Rosemary or Alden or anyone else want to share what they've seen on employee training.
Sure, I'll just jump in. Sorry, I can't be on camera, but yes, that never works. We also found that when you pay for a license to, say, the Marketing AI Institute, and you request all the employees in the marketing department to go ahead and take that program, that the majority of people never get through it. Yep. And I think Sharon, also on the call today, has said that kind of training just never works.
Yeah, so I think the unassisted training, I think some of the online things have a completion rate of 2% or 5%. It's incredibly low. And I know the forgetting curve is way above that as well. So others want to share? So, well, great. Well, let's walk through, and I'm going to walk through the slides.
Paul, we did this is Adam. We did a pretty big sort of training program around Copilot when we got in the M365 early access and getting everyone up to speed. And the problem is if it isn't cultural, right, and these people aren't bringing it into their daily life, it just doesn't stick. So you can give them all these great examples and show them all of these amazing things it can do, and a week later they're just back to doing things the way they always have. So yeah, that's part of the experience I've witnessed, like, within my own organization.
And we've also seen, I know some of us success here is, I mean, the Copilot's not cheap for people in Microsoft shops. It's 10, 15, 20 per month per employee. We have now had multiple conversations with companies who don't see the ROI. One of the CIOs of a 40,000 person company who's speaking at our conference in October, they have 600 licenses. Most people aren't using those 600. There's a proposal on the table by another 10,000, and it's a big number. And they're not quite sure they want to do it, but they know they kind of need to invest in it. And, and they, like a lot of things, we'll just buy the software and not have to think about change management or anything else in here. So I think that's one thing. And the last thing I'll share on that is the John Spielk and I were at a big company, you would know the name, offsites. It was an entire management team, and they had 7 Fortune 500 companies all day Thursday, and not one of those companies could justify or see value in Microsoft's offering. Now, they may come back and change the price, but because the other thing that we see a lot is, great, I want my employees to use it, but then they're using confidential information. So how do I, do with that? So it's really challenging. Go ahead, Lucinda.
Yeah, so thanks. And maybe I'm just asking the question that leads into your presentation. Then how does a company upskill in this? Because I found very similar things, even people who are knowledgeable about it. Like when I say, did you do this? Did you do that? They're not necessarily trying a lot of things or exploring a lot of things. Or they try it for a couple of questions, like, that's not a good answer. And then, like, okay, well, you never say that about your first, search box, and say, the heck with it, I'm not using that Google, right? But no, you just keep like trying things until you finally get what you want. So yeah, I mean, what is the way? Who has done this successfully?
I don't know if anyone's done this successfully. I mean, WEX, the company we're working with, they have 6,000 global employees. They now have 20% trained with instructor-led. We did 850, and they finally got to train the trainer. They've done the next 400 or 500. Certainly, Moderna claims to have trained all the employees. I have yet to speak with anyone. I know, I don't want to use the names of company, 3 companies that sell AI solutions. You guys would all know their names, and none of their employees get trained. So I do have an answer for that, but I want to come back to the few of the comments here, and then I go ahead, Raymond, and then Jay. Go ahead, Raymond.
Oh, I was going to say, it sounds like a great opportunity, and it also sounds like previous methods of teaching or passing knowledge on to internal employees. Those previous methods most likely won't work. This is a new thing, right? I would hope that someone comes up with a way to do small installations of open source open source models and frameworks, something like GPT for all, right? You take GPT for all, you bring that inside, and then you find out which employees are interested in AI and which ones have an inclination to it, and have those be the group that spreads it throughout the rest of the employees. I think if you bring it in like Microsoft and you spend all this money and you tell people go to this URL and learn this, they're not gonna. They have to have a reason to. They have to have an innate curiosity, I think, and then you get the experts that rise to the top in the group. That's just my opinion.
No, and Ray, just to highlight that before we go to Jay, I mean, I've done so many of these things now. It's so clear, the bell curve. There's 5% autodidactic curiosity people in all departments. Data scientists, software engineers, which you'd think would be picking this up. And, so there's something about human nature. There's something about preset demand. 20-30% are skeptics, and I think it is really hard. Change management is really, really hard. And I think the other thing we talk a lot about with executives is moving this from novelty and a cheat tool and a parlor trick to social norm is really, really hard. And we'll talk later on some examples that are working, but it is absolutely change management. Go ahead, Jay, then we'll go to Steve.
Yeah, so I've had some experience at some of the probably larger companies, and one of the things that I would note, I was watching the comments go by too, and there's a lot of truth in some of the suggestions here of if you find that 5% group that you're talking about, that bell curve, and you give them a way to enable, you're also clearing the kind of a path for them, as we probably all have realized with our IT careers. IT is often no, 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 until such time as they're told, okay, now you've got to do this. And so I think the first real concern that would come up would be, is anyone just piping raw company information into a form, and where it goes after that, where does it go? So there's obviously those kinds of concern areas. But I think hackathon formats that align closely to that leading edge 5% can be useful. And then assigning a project amongst groups with an option for one person to possibly take that lead, that might work better in mid-sized organizations. For the larger organizations, you really would have to have an investment in computer-based training, so-called massive online community-based training. And then, of course, it will still apply that there will be probably closer to 25%, not just the 5%, but 25% will attain their competencies because people like to get those badges. But until you make it real for the business, it is just a cursory exposure. It is not necessarily ingraining it into the culture of an organization at scale.
Thank you, Jay. Yeah. And I think the thing I see the executives struggling is that there's been 7-9 studies showing 20 to 40% task productivity improvement with today's AI technology, which will be the worst in our lives here. So it's really a conundrum level. Go ahead, Steve, and then we'll go to Gabriel.
Yeah, two real quick points. I work for a small company called QuestX. We're private equity owned. We have to prove ROI on any tool that we invest in and any technology, as most of us always have had to have done. But we're about to roll out a sales tool called Gong, which is the best AI implementation that I have seen. And a real win for sales teams. As part of that, we are providing training for our entire sales force there as well. If you don't do that, you set yourself up to fail. AI isn't a solution that gets you around training there at all. I think with tools like productivity tools like Copilot, ChatGPT, we're in that sort of stage right now where we don't realize the full benefits. And actually, I think the conversation should really be around change management first. What is the workforce of the future that we can see coming from these tools? And then how do you use those tools to enable them? Don't expect to throw the tools in and see a result immediately just because it's Gen AI. That's kind of how I see it.
Thank you, Steve. Go ahead, Gabriel, then Tim.
Me?
Yeah, please.
So yeah, so I also have 2 points here. Earlier we were discussing about the people are averse to training, or they don't. There's not artifact when they do training, or they start the training and 5% only that completed after all. I mean, my perception of that is more like people are averse of looking at a slideshow with a monotonous voice in the background. They rather like jumping in a call for, let's say, 5-10 people, where they can see the tool being demonstrated and where they had opportunity of talking to a very well-skilled training that can even like solve some extra issues, and even like I say, help them how to use that specific tool with that specific scenario that the employee works with. This actually is a lot more engaging, and people feel included, and actually they will see how their personal task can be done with the help of AI. And the second point is something that Raymond had raised earlier about the fact that, at least myself as both business owner and a person of personal interest, that I keep coming back to AI to get some help about things. It is that I don't perceive cloud tools as something that is professional. It's something that they will do for like a non-sensitive data that is just of common knowledge. Let's say if I want to search how to do, I don't know, carbonara pasta, let's say, then I go to ChatGPT and ask, how is the recipe of carbonara pasta? But if I look for, let's say, how to install Django in a server, I start to feel a little bit conscious, because I'm giving away that I am setting up a Django server, and whoever ever has access to this information, they might, use that later to make conclusions about what am I doing internally. So I would pay money for something that can run on my own computer rather than running on the cloud. If I was going to do something that is on cloud, then it should be like something cheap or even free, but only for things that I would not see any risk of losing information or spreading information about me or my organization.
Would you recommend companies not invest then in Gen AI training and take that money and put it in the specialized Gong, for instance, for use cases for sales or customer support instead?
I'd say that just like since ever, Microsoft has sold the Microsoft Office in a little box where people install in their computers rather than selling Office 365. And people would pay hundreds of dollars back in the old days to have Office installed on their own computers. And things became basically free when people could just use Google Drive or Google Docs, right? And Office 365. If you want people to pay hundreds of dollars, even thousands of dollars, you want to have something that works offline or works on the person's computer. That actually has a lot of value for people.
Thank you. Go ahead, Tim, and then Sharon. Go ahead, Tim.
I think there are a fair number of reasons. I've been involved in a lot of change management around emerging technology, given that's been my career. And so I'd say it's a lot of things. It's not just one thing, and that's why it's difficult. There are a couple things you can always keep in mind. One is that change management is often a program done to the staff, death on arrival if that happens. So if you want to really at least get started on the right foot, start with leadership, because people in the firm look to the leaders to see how they behave in order to determine their own behavior. That's what they want to be, the leaders eventually. So look, well, these people aren't doing it, why am I going to do it? So that's problem number one with a lot of change management programs. It's complicated in the case of generative AI because the use cases for leadership are often not as clear. So for instance, we have Copilot at the organization Manat, where I'm the AI leader. And, I don't write long enough emails as a leader. You don't tend to, when I write memos, it can be kind of useful for things like that. But when I write emails, Copilot's a waste of time, okay? My emails are never more than a paragraph or two. I get the long emails from the staff to review. I get long documents to review, but leaders don't tend to write a lot of complicated emails. So the Microsoft coaching and the other things aren't that valuable. So it is also important to find the right ways to utilize this stuff. if you're, it's here's a simple example. If you want to go work for Anthropic or OpenAI, nobody has trouble taking the math on matrix multiplication and transformers, because guess what? If you don't know how to do that, you can't work there. You just can't do it, okay? But in these cases, everybody's got a full-time job. Most of the companies in the Crucible are knowledge workers who are intense, highly busy intellectual workers who already have a very full plate. This is the other problem people forget about with change management. You have to change, and change isn't just about presenting the new thing. You have to disturb the old thing. And there is so little time for people to be disturbed in. It's very difficult for them to take the training. And then the third part, which Seymour Papert wrote about, and I wrote about a long time ago, is if you send people to training and then you send them back to their environment, nothing sticks, because it's like sending people to Paris for a week and assuming they'll learn French. It's not going to, or sending them to conversational French at night. It's not going to happen. If you want people to learn French, send them to France and stick them in a French-speaking countryside village for 3 months. They will learn how to speak French very quickly. And so part of it is also creating an immersive environment where there's no choice. And that's what I meant about the AI programming. If you're going to be an AI programmer, there's no choice. You have to learn how to use the tools and do those things. So, and then the last thing is the implementers count. And Microsoft's kind of a C- implementer, in my opinion. And so we'll see if OpenAI is any better going direct, or Anthropic is any better. These are good tools, they're useful, but you got to work around the kind of mediocre implementations that at least Microsoft and Copilot has done. So, complex set of factors.
Yeah. Insightful as usual, Tim. Thank you. Go ahead, Sharon.
Okay, can I share my screen for a second?
Please, go ahead.
Okay, let me see. Okay.
Can see it.
You see it?
Well, we see AI First Organization 8524.
Yes. Okay. So, all of this, of course, it's not a digital transformation, it's a business transformation. And so way back when I was brought on to turn around a company, the most successful way to do this, and I had 9 months, so we were all going to be out of jobs, was to do it both ends to the middle. And then when I went to a technology think tank, our job was to commercialize the IP, and to do it both ends to the middle. And you've got basically 3 parts to that. You've got mobilizing middle management, you have empowering employees at the ground level in the organization, and you have enabling the CEO. And so when you enable the CEO, they've got the authority. People want to do what the CEO is doing. The challenge often with AI is the CEO doesn't have the authority, doesn't have like perceived authority. And so that's where people like you, Paul, come in. They need to bring in outside experts, because just like an influencer lends its credibility to a brand, they need to bring in thought leaders to lend credibility to the CEO. Then the CEO has got to model that behavior. And there are real specific behavior habit formation techniques that you can use, and that I use, and that I teach. So, then at the ground level, it's social proof. So I care what the CEO is doing. I want to see him doing it, them doing it. And I want to see my peers doing it. And here's how you engage the peers. And one of the things is you tie it to an existing behavior. It's called piggybacking or habit stacking. You take a new habit, you attach it to an existing one. One of them is stand-ups. So how do you ritualize that behavior among stand-ups? That's something I'd work with companies on. So there is a process, and it works. And by the way, when we use this in technology, we convinced 60% of an industry to adopt a technology. It was a digital twin augmented reality technology. So it's worked both from a turnaround standpoint as well as from a technology adoption. And there's a ton of data on the behavioral science behind this with real companies. It just hasn't been put together in AI before. So it's taking things that have worked in other industries and putting it together in a unique way. And so this is my framework. I'm happy to do a meetup on it.
Right.
Um,
Well, thank you,
so
Sharon. It's fabulous. Yeah, it's really clear. It's change management, and humans are humans, and getting value at scale is non-trivial.
I just want to say something a little bit that's going to be controversial, though. It's not change management, because when people hear change management, they've done that before, and they have an expectation as to whether or not that works, and they think of training and communications, and they
What do you
think
call your program? Is this digital transformation, or what do you call this?
behavior change.
What is it?
It's behavior change for AI adoption.
Okay.
It's really AI adoption. That's what I call it. And it's yes, there's training as a part of it. Yes, there's communication. You might pair somebody in your organization or Rosemary with a CEO. But you form the habit with them. And there's very concrete science-backed ways to form those habits. But is there one specific tool? No, you got to work with an organization to identify those specific behavioral science tools.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sharon. Wow, it is a great discussion. I'm leery to jump into Sharon. My slides. Let me see what makes sense. Let me propose we push this to next week and jump to open mic for the last 10 minutes. I do want to share a few things. We have now done, goodness, 50, 80 board presentations, management presentations, and just as we've seen the same bell curve with humans, it's also the same 99% of boards don't understand how to think about this. My view is 5% of them have a CEO that's saying going this way. Everyone else is trying to figure this out. We have now had multiple requests to have 101, Gen AI 101 for board members. We haven't had a chance to pull that together because they want to know the questions to ask. And then when we get in with management teams, like John Kelsey and I were at a company, I don't know, just a couple of weeks ago, very typical. They had the CEO who's actually somewhat of an enthusiast, but he's not an expert. You know, the marketing wants to do a project, the CIO wants to do a project. How do we decide which project we're going to do here? And in the meantime, there's lots of different views, and IT's off doing their own project because this is technical, and then we have compliance, and in the best interest of this firm, we need to be cautious here, Mike. So let's slow down. Let's not do the fast. Let's not be a leader. Let's not be a fast follower. We'll be a slow follower here, and it's just kind of this conundrum that we see a lot. Yeah, go ahead, Christine.
I just want to say, Paul, I think that you've really hit the nail on the head right there, that there is not a coherent view that now is the time to act.
Well, and I think it depends. That's why we talk about our WINS framework. I think in the crucible, so for instance, I don't want to use that. We're working with 2 offshore companies in India. They're already getting today demands to have their revenue cut by 10% your prices, because we know you're using we know you guys are using Copilot in there. We know it. So in some industries are changing. I know in many industries, I was in many, young talent absolutely gets this full stop. And one of the things I tell executives, you got to understand, this is the biggest career accelerant ever, and your best talent knows it. Why do I know it? At least half the companies I go to, I end up getting an email, someone asking me, my company's not going fast enough. Paul, can you? And one company I was at last year was down in New York City, highly regulated, 100% ban, fired on the spot, break all your fingers if you use it here, go through all security. I do an internal thing here. As I'm walking to the elevator in the damn building, 2 employees come up to me and say how excited they are because they bring their personal laptops. You all know the shadow IT, personal laptops, cell phone. And I'm saving 4 to 6 hours a week. I'm up for a promotion here. I go shopping on 5th Avenue here. It's the best thing ever, Paul. And I said, what are you telling me for? And they say, they're just so damn excited. They can't help it. So there's really are those 5% out there. Let me pause on that, because I think what's going to happen is once we get in it, people are going to start seeing really good feedback, and then we're going to get jammed up from time here. And this is such an important topic here. So let me propose we put my presentation and share until next week. And if we want to go into it, that's great. I think the two other things that we have seen that are very small on the come back to WEX, and they don't take money. Celebrating the wins. So 1 to 2 minute videos of people saying how they use it at their company and the company specific use case is something that's, we've really found a lot. And I think back to leadership, there are 5 minutes in so many different meetings that leaders can put a prompt in it. At the end of a sales meeting, at the end of an all company meeting here, at the end of an HR meeting here. So this notion that, we ask ourselves alternately, have we asked the robots, how are you using the Copilot today? How's your co-intelligence today? Have you even talked to your co-intelligence 9 o'clock in the morning? You haven't done. If you're not doing that yet, it's still parlor trick novelty. And even in cases where there's huge differentiation. I mean, the one thing we do in the sales training is we'll take the $100,000 proposal, Mary and Van, and say, all right, summarize that for me for the CFO in business terms, summarize that in implementation terms for the IT thing, and instantly, or summarize a value proposition in the spin. I mean, unbelievable frameworks. The other thing we saw the other day is helping executives understand you can upload a 185-page merger and acquisition document for a $100 million merger and say, make this 5% better. Tell me the 5 biggest risks of signing this document. You can take their corporate strategy and put that up there and tell me why this corporate strategy. So this whole layer of cognitive advice or opinion that business leaders do all the time is something more than emails that I think they don't always see, and getting them to understand it, I think, is something that's training here. So anyway, that's a lot of talking on my end, but let's hold off on going through the slides for now. It's such an important topic here, only because it's so clear that it's really become clear to me in the last 2 months that the leaders who are doing this, and let me see if you disagree with this, but the companies who get their hands into the clay and they start understanding it and the leaders step forward, they're like, oh my gosh, now we can use the technology over here and over here and over here. So those companies who are doing real experiments are learning more and going further ahead. And the companies who sit back in the laurels are going to be, particularly if you're in these crucible industries, you're going to be further and further behind. So the leaders are going to be even further behind the followers here, which are going to make even more competitive risk from new codes, even more competitive risk for the laggards. And I think in some industries, you can see a radical change in the competitive dynamics in 2 to 3 years. And I think law is one of them. And I think entertainment's another one. I think software coding may be a third. Clearly, blog posting and SEO. But go ahead, Lucinda, then we'll go to open mic.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I was going to just, it's just a little bit of open mic and a little bit of, what we're just talking about. But yeah, so, I'm talking to a few different clients on how to utilize generative AI. And it's very much kind of it's such an exploratory thing. It's not like we just roll in and we say, here you go. It's more like we asked them to come up with the use cases. They said, we brainstormed, but we're not sure, what can it do? And I'm like, well, I don't know your processes really well. So our conversations have to be very joint. It's like they suggest something and I can say yeah, I think it'll do this, but you'll have to do that and that. They'll want to have get certain data from a narrative group of documents and translate those into structured information in a database. So it's been really very, kind of squishy and exploratory. And so I realized I wanted to, this kind of goes into and if the CEO happens to know and happens to have used ChatGPT, a lot of times they can actually be very smart, very articulate about where in the processes it can be. So, question for the group is, so as you're exploring use cases within your company or with other companies, how do you rank these use cases? Like, what framework are you using? I've been looking around for this. I've asked my co-intelligence, and I've looked at various papers from, McKinsey, but all those guys are so high level, it's not really useful. There aren't, towards AI or towards data science articles. I'm just like, how are people characterizing the use cases and then ranking them on criteria? And what criteria are you using?
This week, well, people like Tim's got one. Tim, go ahead, Tim, and we'll call a few other people.
Yeah, I'll give Lucinda a shout out because it's a great question, and a lot of people struggle with it. I think the simple answer, unfortunately, is there isn't a simple answer. I liked what Sharon said in the chat, which was let the work teams decide. There are some obvious use cases. You can start with customer service, sales, anything in summarization and note taking, but those are very broad. And I think each organization is going to have to find traction, and it's not always clear. It's like telling a joke, and the timing has to be right, and the audience has to have the right context. It's just not that simple. So I think you can start with some broad ideas, but you have to really understand the organization you're dealing with. My open mic topic, and I think, Paul, you saw this, I posted on LinkedIn today. If you want to go to my LinkedIn thread, I am just blown away. There's a great article. I gifted it from the New York Times if you don't have a Times subscription, of a fellow who is afflicted with ALS. And I worked in ALS research, the worst disease in the universe, just rots you from the inside. And you lose your speech because your facial muscles deteriorate. And they gave him his speech back through a combination of a brain-computer interface, not Elon Musk's, a research one done, I think, at UCSF, that finally now has enough connection points in the brain to really get enough signal from this fellow's thinking of words. And within a few months, they were able to decode, using machine learning and generative AI, over 100,000 words to 97% accuracy. And then they made a deep fake of his voice, so the guy can talk. It's just unfreaking believable. So to anybody who says, this, to me, the reason that caught my attention and tugged at my heartstrings, first, I worked in this and it's a terrible disease. And second, what else do we want to spend our money on, folks? Everybody complains about how much investment there is. I don't give a flying shit if it improves productivity of my emails 5%. If I can give people their speech back, it's worth every penny, even if it never benefits me personally, and it does. Okay, so I just had to give a big shout out and say, hey, pay attention to the bigger picture. This stuff, what else would you rather spend your money on?
It's really great. I dropped it into the chat for everyone. Thanks, Tim. It really is an inspirational story, and there's going to be more of them like that. Yeah, go ahead, Simon. Then we'll go to Sharon.
Good to see you. Yeah, going back to that question of use case, we've done a lot of client work this year. We've worked with boards and management teams and employees to figure out what use cases. And what we see is there's two approaches that you can argue about whether or not they're complementary. I think they are. But there's a traditional sort of IT top-down planning approach where you get the board together, educate them, get the management team together, and then you spend a sort of a month or two basically going through an exhaustive list of the different use cases. And the problem we have with use cases is we know generative AI is an enabling technology, so it's almost an unlimited number of use cases across tasks and functions. So you can do a sort of top-down, very exhaustive list where you look at, okay, what are the use cases? What's the potential benefit and value from it? And what's the complexity of implementing it and doing an ROI? So you sort of start off with a long list. But the approach that we're seeing with clients that works well is a bottom-up approach. What we know with generative AI is it's really for the first time we can have non-technical people on the front line actually building and prototyping use cases. Generative AI, OpenAI with its ChatGPT custom functionality allows people to build prototypes, which normally they have to go to IT. So what we've been running is a champion sort of incubator program where you take 10, 15 people within an organization, different functions. They're very close to their jobs, and we basically train them up and we say to them, okay, this is how you use the tools. We guide them over 2 or 3 months to actually come up, what are the common tasks and activities that you think in your daily job can be improved by generative AI, prototype them, come up with a list of prototypes, and then actually we go back to the board with 10 to 12 champions, mid-level, junior level, and saying, this is what generative AI can do for our company. And we've seen that bottom-up approach works quite well, because you're getting the people on the front line who know their jobs to tell you what is the innovation potential of it.
That's great. Thank you, Simon. Go ahead, Sharon, and then we'll go to Christina.
Yeah, I would piggyback on Simon. I think I'm a big believer in the bottoms-up approach, and that you empower all employees, giving them the free apps, let the work teams decide, and have them focus on internal productivity issues first. Rather than take it to the client, there's a big unknown cost. The models still have to sort themselves out, but you have to upskill the organization. And so empower them, the work teams, to decide what to work on. And these small, quick wins give people confidence. It's not the big, go big or go home. The biggest barrier is that people are afraid it's not going to work, or afraid that I'm not going to do a good job, or it's going to fail, because those big things have failed before. So work focused on some small productivity issues the team can succeed at, is the best place I've seen to start.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Sharon. And now, related to that, Sharon, before I go to Christine, I want to echo my Dr. John Svioka. He's got it. People haven't seen his thing. He's got very specific things on project selection, and a lot of them are political. You know, make sure you pick a project that has a 12-month payback. Do not make up a new ROI metric. Use the one the organization already understands. Get ahead of the antibodies, which are for sure coming after your budget. You know, so this whole idea that you get really practical, go after a big cost savings bucket internally, so you actually can have a proof case that actually help the organization get confidence rather than just enablement, and then really find the rebels. Well, go ahead, Christina.
Thanks. In my consulting work, I'm working from constraints. So we identify where they have constraints. We use the WINS framework to identify whether Gen AI can be helpful with that, and then we build from the constraint out for a solution. So I don't know if that's helpful to people, but that's a simple approach that we're taking. I had 3 other things I wanted to mention. One is I wanted to give a shout out to customgpt.ai. We're using it on the AI Realized website. Ali Scholler, who's on the call with us today. There's Ali, hello. She programmed it with the content, and we are adding content every day. In fact, we just are adding in Paul's links to Paul's work and so forth. It's very easy to use. Ali may have a few comments she wants to add, and I have been telling everybody under the sun about it. I've got 4 CMOs who are now going to be using it for their website. So really nice product.
Christina, interrupt me for one quick second. If people don't know, that's a class of no-code LLM products out there that custom
And
GPT.
Alden,
and Alden, who's on, got one. There's a few others on here as well. But
Thanks for the shout out, Christina and Paul.
yeah, customgpt.ai, excellent product. The second thing I wanted to mention is that we will have a job board for the AI Realized for speakers and sponsors and so forth. If anyone from this group, this community has jobs that they want to have posted as part of our community, you're welcome to do that. And then I also want to mention all of the Gong comment. My daughter is a physician in a federally qualified health center. Read, they have no money. And they recently adopted the lower end of the Epic product, which is the electronic medical records. And she was singing the praises of the AI. She could not say enough about it, and she is not a technology person. So it was one of the first conversations I've had with her where she was leading me on the technology. It was great. She can record her notes, the connections into things like the prescriptions and filing the insurance claims, and all of that is seamlessly built into it. The alternative prior was she had a cloud-based scribe, and then she had to copy and paste into the record in order for the billing to occur. So much better. Their conferences this week. So very interesting that the product companies are leading us in the technology adoption. If you've used Gong, you know what he's talking about in the AI. Now we're hearing it with this EMR. The more people are using it in products, the more they want it in other areas. So perhaps the leading edge here is going to be product adoption. And the last thing I want to mention is we're coordinating with Ignite GTM, who has a conference at the end of September. They would like to open up or create a new entity for AI leaders to come together on a roundtable once a quarter to talk privately, Chatham House rules, about the challenges that they're facing. So if you are a CIO, a CTO, a CAIO, or someone who's leading AI within your organization and want to participate in helping to formulate what that group is going to look like, let me know. Thank you, Paul.
Great. Alden, why don't you finish up here, then we'll close.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So yeah, as Rosemary mentioned, like the biggest change that we are seeing is like the move from productivity towards revenue driving. Like any product that can incorporate AI and boost revenues by 10%, 20%, that's getting universal adoption. And then on the productivity side, it can go either ways. For companies like universities, those are bottom-up organizations. So we are seeing like lots of teachers and researchers adopting. But then for like private equity type companies, the employees are like, screw it, we don't care for this AI stuff, right? And then it has to be pushed from the top, where companies realize that if they don't have an AI story, then their valuation gets halved. So depending on the culture of the organization, it's either a bottom up or a top down approach.
Well, as usual, thank you, Alden. Fantastic conversation. Let's keep the conversation going.